Since I started distilling a year ago, a bucket of molasses, this big, that's 10 kgs of molasses, has gone up in price by 50%. So it was $65, it's now around $90, $95 for a bucket of this, New Zealand. So why? I don't know. There have been sugar shortages because of lead contaminants in sugar coming into New Zealand. That could be a factor. It could just be a fact that somebody bought a lot of molasses and they're using the price as a way to control the sale of it or supply and demand. It could just be they're trying to stop me from making more rum. I don't know. But buying molasses is now a real pain here in New Zealand, and it's the key ingredient to making the spirit I like to make the most, which is rum. I've made a lot of rum since I started this process a year ago, and I want to keep making rum, but the cost is just going through the roof. So what I want to do here today is a bit of an experiment. I want to make a poor man's rum by recycling some of the dunder that was left over after I've run the still and got the alcohol out. So basically that's what this is. This is rum wash with all of the alcohol extracted and all of the fermentable sugars fermented. What I want to do is boil this up to kill any sort of gross stuff that's in there, which is part of making a normal rum anyway, but then re-add in the sugars to ferment it and then re-distill it. Is it going to be good? I don't know. I can't imagine why not, but it's just something I want to try because I'm bored. I want to do more distilling, and I've been producing way too much of this stuff to use in the garden, to use as dunder. My dunder pit is full, so we're going to skim off any gross stuff from the top of this, and we're going to pour it into this still, boil it up, add in the sugar, add some other stuff just to help with the fermentation, and then we're going to top it up with water, add some yeast, and let it ferment. If it ferments, if it comes out nice, we'll distill it, and hopefully we get a pretty good spirit out of it. Because these have been sitting out for so long, they do have there's some mold of some sort growing on it, but it doesn't have that disgusting fungi, moldy smell that you can get with certain things. It still smells like a rum wash. It smells like it did when it came out of the still, when it went into it. So I'm not too concerned about off flavors. There's always, with dunder pits, there's some interesting amino acids that help actually improve flavor. So as gross as this looks, I think it's going to be, I think we're going to be okay. This is going to be the hard part. I only have two hands. My wife told me never to use this for alcohol creation, so don't tell her that I did. First bucket was chunk free. It actually almost filled up the still. I begin the process of making the wash by boiling all of the old dunder, just to kill any sort of bacteria or any infection that's in there that could interfere with fermentation. And then I get 4 kgs of raw sugar. I used Fiji sugar for this, which is just a raw cane sugar, and once it was all boiled I added that in and I stirred it until it was all dissolved, making sure to scrape the bottom and make sure that there was nothing sticking or clumping or anything like that. The next step was to add another 4 kgs of the Fiji raw sugar cane, and again mix it thoroughly so that there are no clumps, no bits sticking to the bottom, and that it's all well and dissolved. I then added in just a couple of pieces of banana peel as well, and I'll come back to this and speak about it more later on in the process. Then it was time to sanitize my 25 litre fermenting bucket, so I got some liquid sanitizer and cleaned it out and added the entire mixture from my boiler into the fermenter so that we can start adding water and getting it to the right gravity to begin fermentation. This is the point of the process where you're most likely to make a giant mess all over your floor and you have your significant other get very mad at you, so make sure that you're careful and you pay attention to what you're doing. You're also dealing with boiling hot liquids as well, so I don't need to tell you, but be careful about that as well. And just like taking your first piss of the morning, this can be a very long process as well, so make sure that you're paying attention and that you're not getting any splishy splashies anywhere, so that no one else will get upset with you when they get home from work. Now this may be frowned upon where you're from, but I've just added plain tap water to this bucket to bring it up to 25 litres. Where I am, the tap water is actually pretty good, and you can see that there are some banana skins, some banana peels floating in there, and just for fun I chucked in a couple of chilies. I actually couldn't remember doing that until now when I'm recording the voiceover. Now the initial yeast that I started with was a Still Spirits rum yeast, and it didn't do anything at all, so about 2 days later I added some Yellow Label Angel yeast in here just to kick things off. And then the day after, we finally started getting some decent activity on the fermenter. Coming out of winter, it was still a bit cold, so I had my insulation vest on the fermenter to make sure that things were going well. This wash has now been fermenting for about a week. It started off very slow, and I was concerned because I started with about 15 litres of dunder to 5 litres of fresh water that I might have messed up royally with the amount of acidity in here, that it wasn't going to be a healthy ferment. I also decided to try a little experiment because I've seen a few things on forums about making a banana rum with the peel on, or with just the peel, and I've been dumping banana peels in here every couple of days. It must have about 15 or 16 banana peels in here by now, but it's started to go really healthily. It's bubbling away. It started at 1.150 as a gravity reading. It's now down to 1.09 or 8, I believe. So that's around the 9% mark. I'm going to let it go for another week just to chew through whatever else is in there, and to let those flavors really come through. And then, yeah, then we'll start the distillation process. But you can see that there's a bit of a bulge in the lid. That's not normal. And I've had it nice and wrapped up and insulated as well, just to keep everything warm, keep the fermentation healthy. But yeah, this bulge is, you can see, if I put some pressure on it, or if I lift the lid, it's just the warm air inside, I think, that's pushing it up. And you can see some nice healthy banana skins in there. And of course I just remembered I put some chilies in there as well because I'm crazy. 8 days later, and I was finally ready to start the stripping run for this. I don't filter or rack the wash at all, I simply just let it sit for that long and just pour out whatever comes out the hose. Anything that gets clogged or stuck behind just stays in the fermenter, and generally I get a pretty clean wash with no scorching in the bottom of the still. You can see what remains behind is a whole bunch of banana skins, and in the last couple of days I also put in a big scoop of sour cream as well to add some lactobacillus into the mix as well. I'm running the stripping run through my alembic dome with just the condensed rum, just to pass through as many flavours as I possibly can from the wash. And I'm going to collect everything in this 5 litre demijohn. I'm not going to stop and take readings of the ABV at any point, because I'm just going to keep running this until we get to 99 degrees Celsius coming out the top. And that's because by that point we will have picked up most of the alcohol and most of the flavours that we're going to be able to get. When I do my stripping runs, it's usually while I'm doing other things at the same time, so I didn't want this to overflow. That's why there's so much headroom as I'm switching it over to the other demijohn. I'm not expecting to get a lot more than what I've already got here, but I just don't want to run the risk of accidentally having an overflow. And at the end of the run, because I've got a spare drain port in my garage, I help strip down the heat in the still by just draining out a little bit of this straight away. Reducing the volume that's left over in the boiler will just help it cool faster, so I can do my cleanup and collect my dunder that I want to keep in a more timely fashion. And here I am collecting some dunder so I can use it to make an extract to add back into the final product later on. Nearly a week after doing the stripping run, I had enough time to do the spirit run, which I'd need to pay much closer attention to make my cuts. So I add everything that I took back into the boiler, which was around 6 litres of low wines. The aroma in here now that I've poured out the low wines is just amazing. There's caramel, there's chocolate, there's a funky banana smell. So we're going to run the still again today and hopefully get about 5 litres of 4 litres of around 70% that we can then put on wood and leave to age for a while. And we start collecting first drips. I take about 60 mils out for my initial heads cuts that are going to be discarded. And then I take everything into numbered jars, and the higher numbers, 1 and 2, generally a little bit of that goes back to the final product, which I'll show you when I do the mixing. So it's been about 2 hours, we're right at the end of the run now, and I've got about 9 jars here that are usable. The last one here, number 9, that just came off, a little bit hazy. A little bit hazy there, but that might just be because the ABV in it's around maybe 30%. So we're just collecting the last bit, tails, the real tails end for the faints jar, and then we're going to go ahead and measure out all of this, take some readings, and we're going to put it into a nice glass jar with some chips of pecan wood, which I've just roasted in the oven. I'm going to just char up a few bits to give it some char. I've done another rum on pecan wood that's at 70% in a 1.5 litre jar just to age out, and it tastes so good. So pecan is the new thing that I'm onto. When it comes to mixing something like this, I'm still learning how the flavors are all going to play out. I haven't done enough experimentation to figure out what's going to be good or bad. So what I do is I generally start from the middle of the jars. In this case, I'm going to start with jar number 5 or 4 or 6. And I'll discard the entire contents in there until I get up to a litre in the measuring jug. And then from there I'll start working on what has the best flavour. In some cases I'll use a little bit of heads, in some other cases I'll use a little bit of tails, until I've got something that, even though it's still young, is quite palatable. So, straight on the nose, it's got a beautiful caramel to it, which I'm not sure where that's come from. The caramel must be from the sugar. Yeah, just really rich caramel flavors. Maybe a hint of banana peel in there as well, which was very nice. Yum. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's just a flavor explosion. There's definitely some funky banana going on there, which is probably where the caramel's coming from. But even as a white rum, that is very drinkable. That is amazing. So I'm very excited to see what happens when this is sitting on pecan wood for, let's say, 4 months. It's October now. November, December, January, February. We could maybe bottle it up March, April, around Easter time, and it would be, I know it's rushed, but this is a second use molasses. This is we're really wringing out the towel with this one. So I was pretty happy with the way that everything turned out with this rum, and I left it to age on some pecan wood for what's turned out to be 5 months, because I actually forgot that this existed for a little while. So it's been sitting downstairs on wood for that long, and I haven't actually had a chance to get in and taste it. I forgot it was here until I did doing another video at the same time, and I was doing the tasting for that, and I found this jar and I was like, oh yeah. So you'll see that in the future, I'm sure, but let's, for now, try a little bit of this rum. And already, as soon as I opened it, there's a very powerful caramel smell coming out of it, which it has. It's like a burnt caramel and green apple peel, I suppose is the best way to describe it, which is good. Those are characteristics I love in a rum. It's got a really good colour coming through as well from that wood. I wasn't quite sure when I did this how dark I could make it, and because I used some rum essence as well that you saw me extract, I've really been able to darken it up. So it's the type of colour and flavour that I'd go for in a rum that I'd buy off the shelf. In terms of flavour, it's not too different from an oak rum, to be honest. There's that vanilla, and there's that kind of barrel spice that you get in bourbons, maybe because it was a virgin wood. But I like it. It's smooth. It's nice. It's at 55%, and I've got about 3.5 litres, so I might bump it down to around 50% and get a couple of bottles out of that. That's something that I'd be quite happy to just sit on the shelf and have in reserve for mixers, daiquiris, things like that, or just having a sip with a couple of ice cubes. So what's the takeaway from this whole thing? I suppose it's that Yes, the prerequisite for this is that you have to have made rum already and have a whole bunch of leftover rum. But it just means that when you're making rum, when you're accounting for it, if you chuck in an extra $10, $20 or so worth for ingredients, you can get a whole nother wash out of it, which in terms of how molasses prices are going, they've dropped down a little bit from when I started making this video, from 90 to around 80, but it's expensive for what you're trying to do, and it's hard to come by as well, so quite often they're out of stock. So this is a viable option for people who want to make large quantities of rum and don't mind having to do additional fermentations and doing other rum. And I think the flavour that I got out of this is quite unique. It does have a lot of that banana-y flavour coming through. Like I mentioned earlier when I did the initial tasting, not getting a lot of the chili flavour, which I'm actually thankful for. I've turned around on that a little bit and decided that was probably a bit overkill. I think I was throwing too many things at this to see what would stick. And so I'm really pleased with that. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm happy with how it's turned out. And yeah, that's it. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you like making, I'm turning on my dishwasher with my butt. If you like making rum, if you want to learn more about it, you're still in the learning phase, stick around to the channel, guys, because I have another video coming up, I swear sooner than the wait was for this one, where we explore using different types of molasses. So I'll leave you with that teaser. If you are experienced and you have any feedback, any comments, any thoughts, chuck them down in the comments, because I'm sure people will benefit from that as well. I turned it on, I literally turned it on. Stop. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Video coming up in the next couple of weeks of making a lot more rum. And another video I've got in my pipeline as well is just around how you can take the T500 still and start to augment it, add things on, and get into building a still that suits what you're doing. And that will evolve as well into a bit of a spin-off series with a little bit of DIY and a few other little bits and pieces. So look forward to that, and I will see you guys again soon. Thank you so much for dropping by, and I said those around the wrong way.
I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright.